Hi there, I'm Alexis, and in this video I'm going to talk about your auxiliary and inferior functions. So if you haven't seen my last video, which is about the dominant and tertiary function, I recommend that you go back and watch that because it's going to kind of set up some of the problem for which we're finding the solution to here. So in this video we're going to talk about how you can get outside of your comfort zone and really grow. In my previous video I talked about what that comfort zone is and how you got there in the first place. In the last video, we talked about how your dominant and tertiary functions are the same attitude, meaning if one's introverted, the other one's also introverted. And the same goes with your auxiliary and inferior cognitive function. So, for example, if you take the ISFJ, their auxiliary function is extroverted feeling, and their inferior function is extroverted intuition. So they're both extroverted. The same goes if you take the ENFP, for example, their auxiliary function is introverted feeling, and their inferior function is introverted sensing. So they're both introverted. What that means is they're both the same attitude, and it also means they're different attitudes from the dominant function. So that dominant function is really the heavy hitter of your personality, and it's really who you are. So that auxiliary and inferior functions are really coming against your comfort zone and who you naturally are in the heavy hitter of your personality. So what we're going to explore in this video is how you can use the knowledge of your auxiliary and inferior functions to really grow and step out of your comfort zone in a way that feels manageable and like you have some steps to get there. So the deal with this is that they require getting out of your comfort zone. They take bravery and intention, but they do ultimately make you the fullest expression of yourself. So while it may feel uncomfortable at first, there really is like a joy and a fullness of expression on the other side of this. So it's hard, but it's worth doing. So your auxiliary function is a potential talent and not a skill yet. And this is something that you've probably noticed in yourself, and you would include this in a description of yourself, but you tend to use it in the attitude of the dominant function and not necessarily in its fullness. So for example, I'm an INTJ. My auxiliary function is extroverted thinking. When I first started developing my auxiliary function, I was using it in kind of a pseudo way. I was making to-do lists and using a planner. And so those are ways to get things done, but those are very introverted ways to get things done. So that's the first thing to realize is that you probably are using your auxiliary function, but you're probably using it in the way that the dominant function would want you to. So that's the first way you can step out of your comfort zone. The other thing is that you tend to use it in one area of life. So like, for example, I was finding that I was using extroverted thinking in school only, and then I wasn't really using it in any other area of my life. Now I've tried to expand it into a side hustle and using it with friends, using it at home, and really trying to expand it into every sphere of my life. For whatever reason, it can be difficult to really get into it because you might have experienced some negative messaging around it. Because it's a potential talent, like it's not a skill yet, sometimes you mess up. Sometimes you use it in a way that's too much or a way that's not enough or the wrong timing. And so sometimes if you get negative messaging, you're like, oh, that was out of my comfort zone, I messed up, I'm not going to do it anymore. But I would just encourage you to keep trying. And even though if you may have got negative messaging about it or if you've messed up in the past, that it really is worth doing. And lastly, I found that it can be supported by the inferior function. So at first what I was doing in my type development was I was just focusing on the auxiliary function and really trying to hone in on that function. And I found that I was still having a really difficult time getting outside of my introverted comfort zone. So, for my personality in INTJ, I've got introverted intuition and introverted feeling. And I said, okay, well, I need to be more extroverted, and so I'm going to focus on extroverted thinking. And I gave it a really good shot for a good year and tried really to be extroverted, but I found that I wasn't fully getting to the capacity that I would like to be at. And one thing that I've realized over time is that it can be supported by the inferior function. So my dominant function is introverted and is a very heavy hitter. So what you can do is you can take the auxiliary combined with the inferior, which are both the opposite. So in my case, they're both extroverted. And together, I can kind of combat that drive to be too introverted. So going down to the inferior, what I found is that you can definitely use it in times of fun. So I was trying to use extroverted thinking in a way where I could lead more people and be more extroverted, but I found that it was difficult, but it was made easier when I would combine it with extroverted sensing. So if I was leading an event where there was lots of loud music or lots of sensory things going on, it felt a lot more fun, and I found that I really like to hone in on the decorations of it, like huge balloon garlands and things like that. And so I was really able to get more extroverted when I combined both of those. This is another one we tend to use in the attitude of the dominant, like always, but we can use it in its actual attitude when supported by the auxiliary. So for a while, I was just using extroverted sensing, I realized, like with aesthetics. So I would be by myself, so doing an introverted activity, doing makeup or planning outfits. And so those are things that do somewhat have to do with extroverted sensing, but they're not the full true definition of extroverted sensing. What I've tried to do now is really try to use it in groups of people. So I started DJing and try to do more dancing. And so when I combine the auxiliary and the inferior together, I really have truly gotten more extroverted. And I found that it's easier for me and it causes less anxiety if I go into a social setting combining the auxiliary and the inferior functions together. And then I would say bursts of it add value to your life. I can't sustain extroverted sensing for very long amounts of time as far as high energy or those dance parties go. But for those bursts of time, they can be really fun. And I love going on a drive with friends, really bumping the loud music. So you can see how this is very different from the dominant and tertiary functions. They're very contrasted, whereas I would say your dominant and tertiary functions are kind of the default of your personality. The auxiliary and inferior really are an opportunity for growth. So my final thoughts, there's safety in numbers. You might feel kind of insecure stepping out and using functions that are a different attitude than your dominant function, but when you combine them, it really makes it feel more accessible. And then I would say it brings lots of value in a creation-consumption balance. So when you're too extroverted, you're creating too much. And when you're too introverted, you're consuming too much. And so if you can really focus on creating a well-rounded, whole, three-dimensional person, I think you create a lot of balance in your life. And you can consume, other people's content and reading and time reflecting by yourself to really get some good, deep insights. And then taking that into a creation phase where you take all that you've synthesized and you can now create a wonderful product for other people to learn from you. So I think it's a really great balance. Let me know what you've experienced when you're using cognitive functions for growth. I'd love to hear your thoughts.